Okay, so let's get started. So hopefully by the end of this evening, you'll have maybe you already know about it, but you'll have a clear idea what this thing called the hero's journey is. And you'll have some understanding of why I'm here plugging it is a really important thing for you in your life. I'll talk a bit about how I came to the hero's journey, and to just be a little bit dramatic to start off with, in some ways this kind of hero's journey, this mud map for life, in some ways kind of saved my life, and in other ways kind of made my life. I wasn't always this incredibly happy, fantastic person to see before you this evening. And clearly about how it might be of use, of practical use in just everyday life, yeah? So coming here today is not going to give you a six-pack, it's not going to put more money in the bank account, it's not going to make your life perfect. But the idea of this thing called the hero's journey, it's kind of like a compass for life. Or what I call it is a bit of a mud map. It's a bit of a rough guide about what to do, when, and what might be required. Okay, so the hero's journey starts off with this guy called Joseph Campbell. Anybody know about Joseph Campbell? Okay. So he kind of lived his life in anonymity. He was an academic, and very early in life he became ill, was stuck in bed as a young boy and started reading Native American stories. He then progressed on to a whole bunch of other stories because he was an avid reader, and as a very young man he started to realize that lots of the stories he was reading were the same. So then he grew up and became an expert in mythology and started reading folklore, legends, literature, religions, anything he could get his hand on through across time, across culture. And in his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, he put out this idea in the late 1940s that really the stories that enter into a cultural kind of consciousness, like a Charles Dickens or a Jane Austen or a Shakespeare, they're actually the same story being told over and over again. And of course, when I first heard this idea, because I do know everything, well, I thought I did back then, I thought, that's the biggest load of BS I've ever heard. And anyway, it turns out that I was wrong and he was right. So, as a psychologist, I was really interested in how come there is a story that's being told, the same story, before phones, before the internet, even before people sailed in ships and bumped into that country. The same stories were kind of being told. So there's something kind of inbuilt to our psyche about this particular story. And as a psychologist, thinking, what's so bloody important about this one story? So I put this in to remind myself that it can take a while to become a bestseller. But his book didn't become a bestseller until the early 1980s. In fact, just before his death, what happened was that a man called Bill Moyers on the American network public PBS, Public Broadcasting Service, did an interview with him which just propelled him into the stratosphere. Yeah, overnight he went from this unknown academic to moving in circles with George Lucas and all sorts of stuff. What happened was that people realised that George Lucas had used this book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, to write the whole Star Wars stuff. So, again, the same story being told over and over again, and if you've seen the latest Star Wars movies, you'll realise that it's pretty much, very much a repeat of the first story. Now we've got Rey, but we used to have Luke. It looks different, but they're actually the same story. So this is the story, this is what he proposed. Now there's kind of different variations if you look on the net, but this is the version that I adhere to. So we usually, in a story, learn something about the main character's ordinary world. So Snow White's hanging out, she's a princess, yeah, dad's the king, mum's the queen, it's all pretty good, she skips through the day and little birds land on her shoulder and she talks to them, it's all pretty good. Or an ordinary world is, your name is Katniss Everdeen and you live in District 13 and, there's not a lot of food around and your dad kind of died and you've got to look after your mum and your little daughter. Or one of the first stories that I started to do this with was that you're a nun and you're on top of the mountain and you think you can hear the music, sound of music in the mountain, and but you're not a very good nun. So often in the ordinary world, you'll learn about the main character's likes, dislikes, stresses and strains. And when I'm working with clients, this is what I'm looking for with a client. What's their ordinary world? What do they like? What do they hate? Who's in their world? Is there a partner? Is there family? Is there a mortgage? Are they behind on the bills? Is there an addiction? Is there a trauma? All sorts of stuff. You're just learning about people's ordinary world. So the next thing is that there is a call to adventure. Now, sometimes the call to adventure is a good thing. You might win lotto, yeah? Or, as often the case in psychology, the call to adventure is really unwanted. It could even be a trauma. So, in my work, the first time I ever got up the courage to secretly sneak this into therapy, I didn't tell the clients, was a woman who had stage 4 bowel cancer. And I was following this map because I was going to talk to her about what was going to unfold in her life. And I did not call that diagnosis a call to adventure. I called it a disturbance, which I stole from Star Wars, a disturbance in the Force. But she was like, yeah, you talk about a disturbance, my whole life is kind of, you wake up one day and the life you're living suddenly disappears. So calls to adventure are sometimes like that. You wake up in the morning and by the end of that day, the job that you thought was for life suddenly disappeared. You wake up one day and you roll over and you go, hi, sweetheart, and sweetheart goes, actually, I don't love you anymore, and I've got a younger version outdoor waiting. Oh, okay. These things like that, right? Sometimes the call to adventure is intentional, so people might go, you know what, I'm really sick of this job and I'm going to leave Australia and go study overseas. That's a call to adventure. Sometimes falling in love is a call to adventure, you know. There's the classic story of Romeo's this playboy, and you know he's really playing with any young woman he can find until one day there's Juliet, and suddenly it all becomes quite serious. So a call to adventure can be a good thing. It's something that you want to do. I will follow that interest, I will follow that passion, I will follow that love interest. But in psychology, I'm often dealing with unwanted calls to adventure, where there's a new boss at work, and suddenly the job that you loved is turning into a job that you hate, whatever it might be. Okay. So next is, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, I'm just going to go through this part because this is quite detailed and this is only introduction. But the next part is the refusal of the call. So that's the idea that whenever these calls to adventure come into our life, all of us kind of, is anyone offended if I swear?
No.
When these calls to adventure come into our lives, we often shit ourselves, yeah? Because they, particularly if they're unwanted, but also the wanted ones. So for example, in my practice, it's quite common for me to see people after the arrival of a first child. Now that is a call to adventure, yeah? And I'm usually working more with first-time dads who used to be the centre of attention, and now that little person over there is, and they're really struggling with that. What happened, and where's the us, and where's the sex, or you know, where's scratch my back, or whatever it might be. So people kind of, after the call to adventure, are often, they sometimes are in shock. This can't be happening. So for example, in my own life, when I was informed that my presence was no longer needed in a long-term relationship, I was in shock. And you kind of go, this can't be happening. Often in medical settings, people kind of go, this can't be happening, I'll go get a second opinion. People who hear that someone, that they love doesn't love them anymore, they say, that can't be happening. I recently met a couple, and they've been together more than 20 years, and this poor woman, she was completely in shock, and she just said, I think he's just depressed, and he just needs medication. And I was thinking, that's really a refusal of the call. You'll know in your own life when you're refusing a call, when you can hear yourself saying, oh, I can't do that. I can't leave that job, I can't leave that relationship, I can't have that illness, I can't have those issues, I can't have that problem, I can't deal with this, I can't. It's usually people, something's happened in your life and you're just kind of going, you know what, this is just too much, and so you go into denial. So far so good, am I boring anybody to death yet? So denial is all fine. This is a necessary part. Don't try and skip it, yeah? If you're in denial at the moment, don't try and skip it. Denial is a good thing because it gives brains, it gives minds time to accept the reality, which might be quite difficult. So even these first-time dads who have often planned their pregnancy and done, multiple things to get pregnant, and they really want this child, but 3-4 months into it, they're kind of going, wow, what did we sign up for? What the hell's going on? Yeah? Or the new job, you think, I really wanted that job, I worked for that job, and you suddenly go, hang on, this is not the job I signed up for. Or you've fallen in love, and the person, who you think, wasn't that cute? They drop their towel, and they just leave it there. Isn't it so cute? By the 6 months, you're kind of going, that towel? If you don't move that towel's going where the sun don't shine. There's this can't be happening. So this is a time to kind of just get your head around stuff. So for example, when I first met that woman who was diagnosed with 4th stage bowel cancer, she just didn't know which way was up anymore. She had been working full time, she had 2 adolescent daughters in private schools that were doing really well. She was very involved in what they should study and what they should do in the extracurricular, and she was at the school when she wasn't working, she was doing all this stuff. And in the space of the day, that just all stopped. That really kind of throws you, yeah? And denial is a time to kind of, what's really going on, and it's trying to shift from I can't to start to think, oh my God, I'm going to have to do something. So in the hero's journey, people are often being forced to cope with things that they don't want to cope with. And when you think about it, that's often just part of being human. So when I started a hero's journey to start my own private practice, and you're starting off, and part of that is learning about Google Analytics. Does anyone here know about Google Analytics? And I was just pulling my hair out and swearing at the computer and wishing that Google was dead, and this can't be happening. It's just too much to get my head around, that sort of stuff. Okay, so in this next part is often a meeting with a mentor. So, for example, Katniss, she gets taken into the Capitol, and she meets a mentor who's an alcoholic, but he's a person who's been in the games and survived the games, so now he's a mentor in the games. And he's there to mentor her and her male counterpart, Peter, to help survive these games. The woodsman who was going to kill Snow White turns out to be a bit of a mentor. He goes, I'm not going to kill you, you need to run into the deep dark forest that way. Yeah. Mentors might be a therapist. So recently I had I don't know what it was, I just had a spate of clients coming through who had suffered miscarriages. Now in that case, who's a great mentor? A woman who's walked in those shoes. Yeah? So a mentor can be anybody who has kind of been on a similar trail. It's, in the stories it might often be a wise old woman, a wise old man, but it can be anybody who's kind of been on a similar trail. In 12-step addiction groups, we use this idea very well. We have sponsors. And you go along to your 12-step program, and a sponsor is a person who still says, yes, I'm an addict, but I'm an addict who no longer uses, and they're great mentors because they know about the lying, the conniving, the cheating, the storing, the stealing. They're great mentors. They know exactly all about addiction. So a mentor can be anybody who's kind of been down a very similar path, yeah? Sometimes if you're separating, then you run and you meet other people who've been separated, and you can see that, okay, I'm currently thinking this can't be happening, but Yeah, you meet people and they've survived and in fact gone on to have new chapters in their lives. So mentors are people who help a hero make a psychological gear change from I can't to possibly I could. Yeah? And really, when you think about it, even that shift, you think of a life of thinking I can't, that's a very limited life. That's a very safe life, but it's a very limited life, often one of boredom and loneliness. Whereas a person who's thinking, well, maybe I could, now that's a life of probably a lot more failure, but probably a lot more success. So it's these slight shifts which will bring about complete changes in people's lives. But in the moment, you often don't realise this. Yeah, you're just stuck with a problem, sometimes a problem you don't want. So is this making sense? Comments, questions? Okay. So, this first part here really describes what Campbell called the first part of the hero's journey, is where a person, me, you, fictional characters, are separated from their old life. Yeah? So for Snow White, she was in the palace, now she's in the woods. For Katniss, she was in District 13, now she's in the capital. For Maria in The Sound of Music, she was a novice in the, training to be a nun, and now she's going to be stuck in some family of 6, 7 kids, whatever it might be. I mean, have a moment now to think about your favourite movie, your favourite novel, your favourite play, and just try and see if you can, did you learn about the ordinary world? So just make a note now, because I'll ask you to come back through. So what's your favourite movie? Even if it's a recent one or an old one like Alien or whatever it might be. Or your favourite novel, play, and just take a note. And did you learn about the main character's ordinary world? Yeah, who they liked, who they didn't like. What disrupted their ordinary world? What call to adventure did they have? So the queen dies and suddenly your father falls in love with this woman who turns out to be a really nasty stepmother. Yeah? Did they refuse the call? I can't possibly do this, it's too much. And who turned out to be a mentor? So try and make a mental note, because after today, it'll be easy to remember if you can make use of your own favourite story. Okay. So once you meet your mentor, people then cross over into a threshold which Campbell called a special world. So it might be you were in the palace, now you're in the woods. You were in a relationship, now you're single. You were healthy, now you're in hospital. You were employed, now you're unemployed. You were an adolescent, now you're an adult. You were at home with mummy, now you're in primary school. All of these separations in life are happening. It's just that often we don't recognise these patterns. This pattern has happened to you already many times in your life. You just may not recognise it. Yeah? So for example, your ordinary worlds, you may have been at home with a parent, and then when you get to around, well, it's different, but say if you get to around 5 now, you have a call to adventure. You got to go to prep. Yeah? And you might be going, I don't really want to go to prep, and mummy might and daddy might be going, I don't want you to go to prep either. Yeah? But it's the law. And so hopefully you might meet a nice teacher, or your older brother or your older sister who goes, school's great. I don't know if any kid ever says that, but so I'm sure some children do to school. Yeah? And then eventually you cross that first day of school. It's a whole new world with a whole new set of rules and regulations and people and language. Is this kind of making sense? Once you cross into this new world, it's going to be really foreign and really scary. So this part is often full of sadness, particularly if you're losing a world that you really liked. Yeah? If you're being forced to have a call to adventure. But even sometimes, people that I know who they've been in a country town and they want to move to the city to follow a career and study. even that's very sad. Even though they want this call to adventure, like you know, some young people, I can think of some young clients who were coming just because they were kind of falling into a depression because they arrived in Brisbane, which for them was a big city. I guess it's about 2 million people now, so it's getting pretty big. And they don't know anybody. One young guy thought, you know, I'll just join the footy club and that's how I'll connect with people. Well, when he eventually got here, it was the end of footy season. And it turns out that all the people at work were young married people. So there was no social life and no one he knew. And so the only person he had connection with that he really started to sort of talk to was a girlfriend who was in outback Queensland. His Wi-Fi wasn't very good, so they couldn't really Skype. And he was embarrassed to tell her that he was not coping in the new city. So even if you want this call to adventure, there's often sadness in separating from an old life. And then you find yourself in a scary place. It's a foreign place. Now this is particularly problematic in Australian culture, separating. Why is that? What do Australians suck at?
Sharing.
Dealing with grief. Yeah? We've been told to harden up, build a bridge, get over it. Yeah? Grow a set. Yeah? All that sort of stuff. Please don't burden anybody by being sad or down or whatever it might be, yeah? So we go, how you going? Fine. Didn't you lose your job last week? Yeah, but it's all good. Yeah? That's what we do. Yeah? That's why we got depression rates through the roof. Yeah? So we suck at this grief period, and then we often don't want to admit to people that this is really scary what we're doing. Yeah? We don't like to tell people that all. Now, once you cross the threshold, it's mostly bad news. for a while, yeah? And the bad news is that in this new world, this new life that you're about to create, because it's completely foreign, you don't really know what to do. So, for example, I went back at a point in my life and did my PhD. And I remember arriving on the first day of this campus. Now, I was used to UQ, and UQ was pretty hip and happening, man. And I was young, and you know, there was parties, there was people, there was all sorts of stuff going on. My first day arriving at my PhD, when I was 42 or something, really old, and there was nobody on the campus. There was nobody on the campus. There was not even a soul to ask. I was thinking, what sort of campus is this? I got lost. I eventually found the place. I went straight into a meeting with a supervisor and this other staff and people. I had no idea what they were talking about. They were talking about statistics and kurtosis and skew and they were like, what do you think about that, Clive? And I was like, I'm all for it. I had no idea. So there's a whole bunch of tests going on. You're in foreign territory. If you are married and in a house with kids and that's fallen through, you're going to be in an apartment alone. Yeah? Or worse still, at home with your parents. I don't know. Yeah, that's a test. Yeah? If you've been employed and now you're not. Yeah? Hello, Mr. Social Security. I'm feeling so ashamed just even being here, kind of stuff, yeah? Whatever it might be. Tests. Often this new world requires us to learn a new language. So this first family I dealt with, the woman with the diagnosis of cancer. Now, you literally go through tests, blood tests, organ tests, all sorts of patience tests, tests of patience. When they were reading back to her these results, she couldn't decipher what they were saying. It's a whole other language. You're completely out of your depth. So tests are really difficult, but the great thing about tests is you're actually learning the skills that you're going to need for this new life. Yeah? A really good example is Katniss Everdeen. In her ordinary world, there's mum, there's sister, and I guess there's scarcity, poverty. Do you know what she lacks psychologically? She's a loner. Yeah? she's got one of those brothers, what's their name? Hemsworth brothers. And she's even cold towards him. Yeah? Is that right? A Hemsworth brother? Is that his name?
Hemsworth.
Hemsworth, thank you. Yeah. Right? By the end of the story, what's she got? Love. Yeah. And lots of heroes' journeys are about love, both fictional ones and us in real life. You wouldn't think of it as a love story, but that's what she's really, the reward that she gets for undoing all this stuff is love and connection. Yeah. What happens to that singing nun in The Sound of Music? She thinks she's supposed to be a nun. Yeah. She really wants to be a nun. She's really trying to be a nun, and she sucks at being a nun. Right? By the end of it, what's she got? Love. Have you seen Fast and Furious? Guess what the elixir is in some of them? Love. A lot of these stories are about people learning to connect. People who have lack of connection in their life, who maybe come from families that have a lack of connection. Yeah, this sounds pretty human. Yeah, evil stepmother, or parents die, or you're living in the stairwell under the thing and you're muggles. Muggles? Is it like muggles? Muggles? You know, there are this awful aunt and uncle who treat you poorly. Yeah? Disconnection. By the end of the story, he's got connection. So, there's common themes that often come out. Love is often one of them. But my point I was trying to make, 2 hours ago, was that the way to create this new life is only going to be through tests and obstacles. So, when I became single again, one of the biggest tests was staying awake. Because people don't go out to bars till, 11? So I would have a nana nap, I would have an espresso coffee, and then I'd get dancing gear on, and I'd go. Yeah? I'd try and stay awake for a couple of hours so I could talk to people, because normally I'd be in bed by 10. It was a test, yeah? Tests are the ways that you're going to learn new skills to create a new life. Part of these tests, you will make allies, people who support you in that, yeah? But you also have to make enemies. Every hero has to make at least one enemy. Why would that be? What does an enemy do? For a Katniss or a Snow White, what does poor Snow White need an enemy for?
Drives them.
Yeah. Enemies help you to sharpen your skills. Yeah, you've got to outthink them. You've got to outmaneuver them. They're determined that you're not going to have a happy ending. So you've got to be on your toes. So if you have an enemy at work, yeah, be grateful. Yeah. Trust me, I said this this took me a long time to learn this lesson, yeah? Because often you just want them to drop dead.
Yeah.
Yeah? But to actually get to the point where, that person, I hate their guts, but gee, I'm glad they're in my life. It's a really sort of difficult thing to say, because they're actually helping you to learn the skills that are going to create a new life. Anyway, hopefully this will is this making sense so far? Okay, am I going too fast, too slow? All good? Alright. So, the basics. At various times in your life, you will either intentionally or unintentionally, by force, be separated from your usual life. Whether it's being forced to go to school, or finishing school and going to university, starting a relationship, ending a relationship, getting a job, losing a job, getting a diagnosis, having a trauma, moving countries, whatever it might be. Separation is part of life. The separation causes a significant life problem that can only be addressed by you changing. Yeah? Now, this is really well done, I think, in The Hobbit. I haven't read the book, I'm cheated, I only saw the movies. But poor little Frodo's got this ring, right? And this ring can destroy the world. And the Kate Blanchett character, this very tall, ephemeral kind of spirit-like creature, reminds him that even the smallest person in the world has important things to do. Now that seems like a bit of a cliche from a Hollywood movie, but when you think about it, part of my job is to remind people that even small people like us, you know, Ellen DeGeneres doesn't know about us. Hopefully we won't be on a current affair tonight for some shonky thing we've done. Yeah, we'll have these quiet little lives that no one will know about. But this quiet little life is here for a particular reason, and the world needs our particular reason to be fulfilled. And again, that sounds really cliche, but I think the hero's journey really taught me that. And initially with my own life, and then with the lives of people that I started to work with. Yeah, people who think, well, I'm not much, I'm nobody, who cares about what I do? It's not important. It is important. It's important to a lot of people. Okay. To solve the problem, you will need to learn polar opposite skills. So, for us anxious folks who hate conflict, guess what we have to learn? Conflict skills. Yeah? For people who've come from families where there's no emotional intimacy, guess what? You're going to have to learn how to be emotionally intimate. For people who are timid, you're going to have to learn to find your voice. For people who come from very angry places, you're going to have to learn to let go of that. Polar opposite skills. Yeah? This is often the thing in marriage. When you're a single person, you get to focus on your own needs, and you need to do that. When you marry, you need to focus on the needs of the relationship. And I don't know about you, but I find that sometimes really tricky. I want to just focus on my needs. Bugger, yeah? It's an opposite skill. Opposite skill. And you can only learn these skills by going through ordeals and tests. Yeah? Okay. Now, you won't know how to pass the tests. You're just going to have to do trial and error. I remember one of my first tests as a young 14-year-old. My mother let me go to a party, which was underneath somebody's house. The parents were upstairs, and no one had ever told me about kissing and that there was tongues involved. And I was really shocked. Really shocked. Yeah? Isn't that dirty? Am I going to get some sort of disease? Mind you, I also had some physical response to that, which kind of kicked in after a while. But it's learning as you go. If there's some new person at work and that you just have no idea how to deal with them, you're going to have to learn as you go. Yeah? If you fall into a sexless marriage and you know you haven't had sex with your partner for, you can't remember the last time, you're just going to have to get back on the horse and learn as you go. Yeah? These are all really difficult, challenging things we'd rather not do. Could we just take a pill? Can we just watch a movie? No. You will make many mistakes, but each mistake helps you to master the skill. So in my own life, this is a little bit ironic, I think, and I think this is the correct word of the term ironic. I was completely conflict avoidant as a child, and if you'd met my mother, you'd know why. Yeah? And so we were all very obedient, very, very obedient. Now, as an adult, do you know what some people call me as an adult? Captain Conflict. Now, I have no idea I'm being even conflicting, but what I've learned is that I'm sort of saying things from my point of view and having a voice. Well, that's going to get you in conflict. Yeah? I want to go to the Gold Coast. Well, I want to go to Noosa. Well, there's an argument. Yeah? Whereas if I was younger, it's like, yes, Noosa looks really good. Yeah? So this is the way that you master the skill. Now this might sound a bit sort of new agey, but stick with me. you're going to have to say, if you undertake a hero's journey, and you can say no, people get stuck and say no. People get stuck in that refusal stage for decades. If you say no, that's fine, but if you say yes to the adventure, what was it going to make? You're going to have to say goodbye to those old parts of yourself. So, for example, if you look at Titanic, which I rewatched when I was very, very sick very recently, and that is really a story of a young, obedient girl, who learns to be disobedient. It's a story in learning to be disobedient. That's why lots of adolescent stories are about rebellion. We need adolescents to rebel. I often have to remind parents about this, because we don't need people to just say yes sir, 3 bags full. We need people with new ideas, fresh ideas. So you have to say goodbye to your old obedient self. I don't know about you, you may know these people. Sometimes in therapy I see people whose elderly parents say, jump. And the middle-aged child, who may be in his 60s themselves, go, how high? They still haven't learned to say no to mummy and daddy. Yeah? Okay. So you have to say goodbye to old parts of yourself if you undertake a hero's journey. Now, when I first read this from Joe Campbell, I used to think, oh, please, what planet is this guy on? But what I've discovered both personally and professionally is that in undertaking hero's journeys where you're finding your way, finding your voice, that what happens is you become more who you really are. Does that make sense? So there was a period in my life where people had said, I don't know, what do you think of Buddhism? And I would have gone, well, what do you think? Yeah, whatever you say, yeah? Whereas now, Buddhism, no, I don't really know much about it. It seems kind of interesting. I like some of those statues in the garden, whatever it might be. So, but you're just becoming more your true self. Heroes are often people finding their voice. And in finding a voice, people find connection. So these seem to be 2 of the main things in living a life, yeah? Finding out who you really are. Years ago, I had this young woman who came to therapy for a debrief following a bank robbery. And, so I'm there and I'm, okay, let's talk about the bank robbery and blah, blah, blah. And she's going, I don't want to talk about the bank robbery. And she was quite distressed, and I was thinking, well, if not the bank robbery, what are we going to talk about? We'll talk about mummy and daddy. And I thought, okay, why mummy and daddy? Well, mummy was a doctor, daddy's a doctor, grandfather was a doctor, brother was a doctor. You can see where this story's going. Guess what she was studying? Medicine. Did she like medicine? She hated medicine. Do you know what she really wanted to be? A chemist. Like, that's such a terrible thing. Right? Now, she was scared of telling these very generous, very loving, very well-intentioned parents that she wanted to be a chemist. And at first I was thinking, this is not a genuine problem. We need to get out of this office because this is not a genuine problem. But she was genuinely distressed. And her attempts to talk with her parents had met with threats. If you don't, doctor, we will pull financial support. You will have to work. You will to leave the house. She's like, oh, okay. So, anyway, long story short, she learned skills to find her voice, to tell her parents, you know what, Mum, Dad, I really love you, but I don't want to be a doctor. Becoming more who you really are, living a life that's more in tune with your own interests and your own passions. Not the one that Mummy and Daddy think you should have, not the one that your family says you should have, not the one that the culture says you should have, just the one that you are. So, following heroes' journeys is actually quite a bit revolutionary. So I recently worked with a man whose family was Indian Fiji, and he was working in government for a well-known politician, and in terms of his family, he had made it, and he hated it. He worked all the time, and these advisors that they have, the politicians, they earn terrible money. Long hours, terrible money. So his relationship was in jeopardy because he wasn't seeing his partner, but he had been programmed to be this highly successful migrant. Now that's not a bad thing. That's not an evil intentioned family member going, haha, I want you to be successful. But that was not him. His passion is fishing. He wants to work in a fishing store and fish. So we worked towards him finding his voice around that with his family. But it was a big extended family. Now that's a lot of pressure. Yeah? Another time I worked with a young man who was a brethren. I don't really know much about him, and I hate to be disrespectful, so I don't know much about him, so if I'm disrespectful I apologise now, but I think they only eat with other brethren and you can only marry within brethren. He was a young gay man, so we worked towards him telling that. Now he lost every living relative he had in one day. Now that's the kind of grief that usually happens in war zones. But when I met with him afterwards, he said, you know what, I could not have lived that life one day longer. He was more him true self, at great cost. This is what heroes are doing all the time. They're struggling to be who they really are, not what other people want them to be. And that's really tricky sometimes. Okay. So before I start on this next beautiful slide, it's munchie time. So what I'd like us to do is have a bite to eat. I want to keep it pretty brief. Okay. So in your little handout, you'll notice at the back you've got these two diagrams. And the hero's journey happens on two levels. It happens on an external level. So what and what I mean by an external level is these things happen in the real world. So falling in love and starting a whole new chapter, that's a real world thing. Starting a new job, getting a child, having a diagnosis, these are all real world things. But the reason that I became so obsessed with this thing called the hero's journey is because remember I said to you initially, what is so important about this one story that just keeps being told and retold and retold? This is the reason. It turns out that the story provides stages for how psychological change happens. You know, in psychology, I'm a psychologist, it's the business of change. We're obsessed with change. Whether that's how to improve little Mary's behaviour in grade 1, we want it to change, or whether we want increased profits, organisational psychology, that's change, or whether we want, I don't know, less anxiety, that's all change, or less depression. We are obsessed with change. How does change occur? And so when I saw this, I realised that this is actually a model for how psychological change. So, for example, in the ordinary world, you know, if you think of your fictional character that I asked you to write down before, or if you think of a Snow White or a Katniss Everdeen or a Harry Potter or a Luke Skywalker or a Rey from the latest Star Wars, or a David Copperfield or a Romeo or a Hamlet, we're following a psychological journey. So who remembers their grade 10 Hamlet? You know, Shakespeare, Hamlet, kind of. Well, initially, what you find in following his journeys is that initially the main character, the fictional and the real, we have little idea of what the real problem is. So, for example, if you're looking at a Katniss Everdeen, she has no idea when we first meet her that her real problem is her fear of connection. Yeah? People outside the family are dangerous and to be kept at a distance, because that's the kind of world she lives in. Snow White has really no idea when Dad remarries that lovely stepmother has a bit of a dark side. Yeah? Luke Skywalker, you know, when he's complaining about his uncle who wants him to be a farmer, he has very little idea of what the real problem is. what's really common is often I'll see people in a clinical setting, and so for example, that couple who'd been together for 27 years, whatever, and she thought her husband was simply depressed. Very little idea what the real problem is. Yeah? In my own life, when my first long-term relationship kind of just unexpectedly died on me, I had real little awareness of what the real problem was. I thought it was him. Of course it wasn't, it was me. Well, it was partly me, partly him, but I had to address the me part, yeah? So what this does is kind of map out the psychological changes. So if you can see that as the stages progress, the hero is becoming more aware of the problem. A really, I wouldn't say easy example, but a not so uncommon example is that I meet people with addiction issues. And they might say things like, my addiction is the thing that holds my family together. It's the thing that keeps me going. Yeah? Or they might think that the addiction is the problem. The addiction is not the problem. Addiction is an attempt to solve a problem. People are drinking or drugging or self-medicating to deal with feelings. That's something where the real problem is, yeah? It's not the addiction. So, but as you can see, as they progress through, they're having an increased awareness of it. So, for example, in an addiction sort of setting, people might live here with addiction issues for years, and we know that, say, for example, most alcoholics, they're in middle management and they're doing pretty well till about 4:30, 5 p.m, and they knock off and they go home, and by 10:30 they're pretty plastered, and they have fairly terse and tense relationships with people in their lives because their main priority is their substance, not people. And they might be here for years. And then that starts to affect work, or family get to a point where someone in the family goes, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. This is a call to adventure. You know, when the cops pull you over and you're over the limit and you've got 2 children in the back, and then you have to tell your partner about that, that's a call to adventure. Yeah? You're out of the house. So these things, and now you can't deny it anymore. There's a charge pending and you put the children at risk. I mean, these things are happening all the time, day in, day out. Stage 3 is the refusal stage, which we all have to go to, yeah, or go through, where really there's just fear. All heroes' journeys start with fear and sadness. Sadness about losing your old life, and fear about what's supposed to happen. Now, in our culture, we've pathologised those 2 emotions. We call fear anxiety, yeah, and we call sadness depression, because you're not supposed to have them. And if you have them, I want you to get rid of them right now, yeah. And don't tell anybody about it, because it's just being a burden. So harden up and get on with it. I mean, I'm sort of exaggerating, but those messages are actually there. So you're fearful and trying to resist the change. For most of us, I of course have never done this, but for most of us, we're going to engage in a lot of blaming. You know, the problem at work, it's Mary, it's Susie, it's Ted, it's Rajneesh, it's everybody else, because I'm doing a great job, let me tell you. The problem in my family, it's the kids. No, it's that particular kid. Actually, it's both of them sometimes, because it's not me, because I'm a fantastic parent. The problem in my wider family, it's my grandfather, because he's terrible. Like, we blame. The story that we tell ourselves is blame. My relationship failed because of my partner. My job failed because of my boss. My schooling failed because of my teacher. My relationship failed because there's something wrong with you. Like, blame. That's resisting change. And heroes are people who kind of wake up to the idea that you can spend the rest of your life blaming people, and you might get them to change for a morning, if you're lucky, or a day or 2, but then they go back to being their old selves. Heroes are woken up to the fact that if there's going to be a problem, guess who's going to have to change? Me. There's a cartoon that used to go around, and there's a guy at the front, there's all these people, and he's going, who wants change? And everyone goes, we do. And then he goes, who wants to change? silence. Yeah, because we're all busy blaming everybody else. Stage 4 is where you meet your mentor, who's going to help you not get rid of fear, yeah, but just deal with fear. So, for example, if I once met a person who had never invited a person out, and he had told himself that he could never cope with rejection. Right? So you're never going to get rejected. Yeah, but what kind of life are you going to have? Pretty lonely. Pretty boring, actually. So I was the mentor, and we started to do things that scared the hell out of him. Not overnight, just little things at first. I'm not some kind of weird sadist, yeah. But he was learning that you can actually be rejected and the sky didn't fall in. It wasn't the most pleasant of experiences, but he could survive it and go again. All these sorts of things, yeah? Learning the polar opposite of what he told himself for many years. When you cross this first threshold into this new world, whether it's from employment to unemployment or single to married, or you live in the castle and now you're in the forest, here you may still kind of not want to change, but the penny's dropped. Actually, yep, I have to do something about this issue. This is the person with the addiction issue who realizes, you know what, I can spend the rest of my life hiding things, or taking the long way around to do that, or having a weekend away, or whatever it might be, but at some point I'm going to have to change. It's the person who, or what's an often difficult call to adventure is if people have a trauma. You have a motor vehicle accident, yeah, and after that you have difficulty sleeping, you have difficulty trusting people on the roads, and you have difficulty driving, and suddenly you get this very tense person, and suddenly you're tense with the people that you love and all this kind of stuff. Down here you have to realise that I'm going to have to commit to tolerating high levels of fear if I want to reclaim my life. So this hero's journey, I've been playing with it now for, I think it's about 25 years. I'm never quite sure when I kind of got onto it. And I have yet to find a scenario, a real life situation where this did not apply. So this is the reason that I'm so besotted with it, because it's helped me to find my way through life when I didn't know where I was going. It helped me to realise, being the anxious person that I am, is that I can survive really anxious things. Yeah, I don't like it, but I can do it. And boy, the rewards that come from that, yeah? And that if you follow through with experimenting with these new ways of being and change, that you will have a whole new life chapter where you master these skills that previously you lacked. Yeah? Okay. So, Joe Campbell put forward this idea. There's the man himself. And as you can see, he's read one or two books. That I call it a Mudmap for life. Some Americans have a bit of a problem with that, but people, I think it's pretty obvious what a Mudmap is. Yeah, it's a really rough map. So that if I'm having a party on the weekend, I might get a stick in the mud and I go, well, you drive past the Caltex and the second on the left, just head down there till you see the lights. It's a pretty rough map. The hero's journey is a rough map. But the good thing about having these stages is that we know from all writers across the century, from people who've studied the hero's journey, what is involved at each stage. So initially in my own life, I had a screenwriting, a book for screenwriters, and I had written some plays and was dying of starvation as an artist. But I started to use the questions for writing the play to apply to my own life, and that's when things just opened up. So, for example, enemies. Yeah, I had made sure to never have any enemies. And here I was reading this book about heroes have to have enemies and what enemies are required to do. Well, heroes have to hang out around their enemies. You have to outthink them. Sometimes you have to befriend them. Yeah? Do you remember when Dorothy's trying to get into the castle of the Wicked Witch? And she's inside already, and her little helper friends, they dress up as the bad people and walk in. Yeah? It's a great little metaphor. Get into the skin of your enemy. Think like your enemy. So that's what I would do. And those people that I wanted to drop dead who were really pissing me off, I would kind of hang out with them more. And I'd kind of try and maybe a bit more like them, or if that worked, I'd test things out. It completely changed my relationship with a whole bunch of people and helped me to learn skills that nice, quiet, docile, anxious Clive had never even thought about. So it's a very powerful little tool to use if you know it. Campbell said that, well, his belief was that in times gone by, people kind of knew this story. But what we do now is we just see it literally as a story. We've forgotten how to read the symbols. Whether it's a Harry Potter or a Katniss Everdeen or a Sound of Music or Apocalypse Now or Charles Dickens or Romeo and Juliet, whatever, the story is actually giving us symbols for how to live a full life. And that's what the hero's journey is. It's a key to understanding the symbols. Okay. So I think I already ear-bashed you about this. So he's thinking, she is the problem. And she's thinking, he's the problem. Whereas actually, they both are the problem. I remember, I often tell this story because it's a really good example of a woman I met when I first started to use this in a psychiatric hospital. And she had been stuck in stage 3, the refusal of the call, I think for about 20 years. And she, and I was the new kid on the block, and she'd been through all the other therapists, she'd been through all the psychiatrists, and she kind of had these periods where she would come and stay in the psychiatric hospital, then go home. And one of the reasons I met her is because we'd have a photo of each client, and she had this beaming, smiling face in this photo. I thought, it's going to be a cinch. And I met her, and she was possibly the most negative person I've ever met. And she just launched into this whole story about how psychiatry had failed her, medicine had failed her, psychology had failed her, her husband had failed her, her children had failed her, everybody had failed her. Just this story, it was overwhelming, just blame, blame, blame. I was young and naive, and she described her marriage as a living hell, exclamation mark, and I was going, that sounds terrible. Paraphrasing, summarising. And I just kind of went, have you ever thought of leaving? And then she rose up. She was like, how can you say that to me? Don't you ever say that to me. No one knows. La, 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 la. I kind of just made this whole other story about why she could never leave. Now that's a woman stuck in I can't. Yet in the process of telling her nightmare, she had told me that there was another man that she had loved, and there was another life that she had wanted. And she had never really loved this man, she never really wanted this marriage, she never really wanted those kids, she never really wanted anything. But she was never going to leave. That's a person stuck in fear. Now, she might have a very nice bank account, I don't know. She might have nicer holidays than me, a better car, who knows? But what kind of life is that? Stuck in fear, stuck in I can't. I just thought that was a living hell. Yeah? Okay, so the idea is if you're going to do this hero's journey, you have to give up the blame game, and you have to be the person who's going to change. And when I normally tell people this in therapy, sometimes they're not very happy about it. And I might go, idiot. Okay, now, this thing that we call the hero's journey, you are already so familiar with it. The hero's journey sounds like some airy-fairy new age thing. I guess it is a bit. But you are so familiar with it. You have probably heard it read to you, seen it, read it yourself hundreds of times. Yeah? Disney's got really good at it. Yeah? So what happens is that your ordinary world is that you've got a sister And it's great. You play together all the time, and you're both princesses, yeah? And then one day, your sister accidentally kind of zaps you with the ice, or you fall over. I think she falls over on the ice, yeah? Or she gets hit with the zap, I think, and she gets the strand of different coloured hair. A permanent marking, yeah? She's been scarred by her sister. Scars are common motifs in stories, yeah? It's often the person with the scar who saves the day. I'm sure some people have scars here. Just remember, people with scars, we save the day. Okay. So what happens then is, after this call to adventure, you then separate it from your sister, and you have to peek through holes, and you sing songs about being alone in the castle all day. And the rest of the story is about her overcoming many, many obstacles, life and death, to be reunited. It's the other kind of love story. It's a family love story. Yeah? Another popular story. So this was initially a book, translated into the film. So you move home to your tiny town that's high up because the altitude's cool most of the year for vampires or something. And, you know, dad's a local policeman, and you're no longer living with your mum. You're going to re-establish this connection with your dad. And you meet this guy who glistens in the sunlight. Yeah? He tends to be a bit handsome and wear a bit too much makeup, but he's a kind of interesting guy, and he can move really quickly. And then before you know it, you start to separate from the very person that you've come here to connect with. And then you go through a whole bunch of tests and obstacles to connect. Most of the people I see in therapy have problems connecting. I, of course, don't, because I've been perfect now for many, many years. It's true. It's this, psychologists, we don't call it connecting, we call it attachment, you know. We don't call it love because we're too clever for that. But that's what it is. And whether it's anxiety or whether it's depression. So, for example, if I see somebody with a diagnosis of depression, often they're fearful of telling loved ones about what they're really feeling. Same with anxiety. They're fearful of finding their voice with loved ones. Yeah? That's a difficulty connecting. And hero journey stories are often about people learning the skills through obstacles and tests, through hardship, about how to really connect. Make sense?
Mm.
If it might, I haven't asked enough questions yet, so does anyone think I'm talking too much or no? Okay. So these are all probably examples that you know really well. So there's a Harry Potter, there's a Wizard of Oz, there's Dorothy, there's Babe, there's Katniss, there's the Shawshank Redemption. People who are living their lives and got separated. Yeah? And then find themselves following that call to adventure with a life that they don't really want. And they have to go through a whole bunch of tests, a whole bunch of ordeals, face life and death situations to create a life where they're more connected, more connected, more connected, more connected, more connected. See, there's a bit of a theme happening here. So you get separated from your usual job and get called on to this special case about someone who eats people. Yeah, you have to go. One day you're living life in your village, and then the English soldiers come in and kill your loved ones. That's a separation. That's a loss. You can't get a job as an actor, so you separate from being male, and you go through a whole bunch of tests and obstacles to get a job. And as you can see, Lion King does it beautifully, The Truman Show, Home Alone, they all follow heroes' journeys. Something separated from their usual life. They went through a whole bunch of tests, through a bunch of obstacles. They didn't know what to do, didn't know how to do, but each time they did it, they got better. And initially, connection, not connection, yeah? He actually leaves the fake reality and moves into reality. Connection, yeah? What does he do?
ends up in the queen.
He dies.
Dies, but
Yeah.
he's the queen on the plane.
But it's his death that is the birth, yeah, of the nation. So, you know, I could have talked about, I could have gone through these other things that in all of these stories, you have to give up an old part of yourself to become who you really are. And the way that you get rid of that old self, quite often quite reluctantly, is through tests, through ordeals. One day, you know, you're just being a Marine, and the next minute you lose your legs, and then your brother dies. Turns out you've got the same DNA as him, and yeah, you get separated from your life as a Marine, and you get sent to a very strange place where people are blue and triple the size. Yeah? But again, through ordeal after ordeal, some of them life and death, actually most of them life and death, yeah, you win through and find connection, but you also save the planet. Yeah, this is not really a story about, oh gosh, isn't that saving the planet? It's about turning a person who was a killer into someone who protects life. The polar opposite skill. Yeah? Hobbit, happily married soldier, gets separated from that soldiering life, becomes a slave, finds connection, dies, rebirth. Writer, death, rebirth. Oh, babe again, yeah. I mean, it just goes on and on, getting separated, call to adventure. This happens all the time. Harry, Katniss, the Kung Fu Panda ones follow them beautifully. There she is in all her glory. Little does she know that she's soon to be a mum with 6 children and have to walk over the Alps to get away from those Nazis. The Matrix does it beautifully, yeah? And in fact, there's examples on the YouTube of going through the Matrix with a guy called Christopher Vogler, who's a screenwriter. And his book is the book that I used to map my life before I wrote my book. And I was writing plays, and I was using his book to write these plays. And but he describes the hero's journey beautifully, of how this guy is working in an office one day, and he just has this idea, and this is really common in hero journey stories. This is really common in what I often say to people in my clinic. You'll know, what I'm trying to find from people is their ordinary world. And often people have spent a long time creating their ordinary world. And they're very busy, and there's emails, and there's dry cleaning, and there's pickups, and there's drop-offs, and there's bills, and what was that? And there's stuff that you forgot to do, right? But somehow, in an ordinary world, there's just this idea that, is this all there is? Is this it? But you know, you don't have enough time to think about that, and you've thought about it for 30 seconds, and that's all the time you've got, because then the phone rings, or there's someone to pick up or drop off, or there's a job to do, or something broke and you need to fix it, whatever. I'm constantly meeting people who have very, very, very busy lives and don't like the life they've got. That was that woman. And I dared to say to her, have you ever thought of leaving? And that's when she rose up in all her glory, and how very dare you. This is a story of a guy who's got his life, but there's some kind of feeling that his life doesn't quite fit. That young woman who was in the bank robbery, she was pretty busy studying medicine, but she just had this idea, I've got this life, it just doesn't fit. Recently I met this, just be careful about details, a young man who's a mechanic. And he spent a long time being a mechanic, and he loves music and loves writing, and he has a girlfriend. And he came because he's highly anxious and also has some depression going on. And when we started to talk about it, he doesn't like any of his life. He doesn't like being a mechanic, and he doesn't want to be in this relationship. But she's moved here from overseas, and her visa depends on him being in a relationship. So guess what? Polar opposite skill he had to learn. I said this in a very nice, gentle way. I'm a very nice therapist. But I had to sort of gently say to him, you're a liar. When you say I love you, you don't. When you say I'm doing this for us, you're not. And those people, they need an employee that actually wants that job. That woman, she actually needs a man who actually wants her. And so, if you work gently enough, sometimes you can sort of psychologically jiu-jitsu people just quietly, and they kind of go, "Ooh, that's right." And it's kind of like a bit of a wake-up call, yeah? Like, why am I wasting my life? This morning, there's an article on Tomic, Bernard Tomic, tennis player, boom, boom, boom. I hate tennis. And of course now, Aussies, we don't like to hear that our tennis players don't like tennis. That's a bit, we should kick him out of the country, I think. But there's a young man who somehow has fallen into making money as a priority. Now he has very nice cars and he has houses all around the world, he says. But what kind of life is that? Now I'm not saying that you all have to leave your lives now and take to the road and just have a swag and go. No, but what I'm trying to say to people is, do you like your life? If you do, great, yeah? But if you don't, what bits don't you like? And why the hell are you doing it? Are you stuck in an I can't? One of the very first people I ever met was this is years ago, when I first started toying with this, and he was earning $80,000 back in the 80s, which is probably like 200,000 now, right? And again, I dared to suggest to him, he was a chef. And of course chefs work crazy hours, and they're very stressed people, and I think they also sort of inherit these role models where it's normal to scream and yell because that's how perfection is achieved. So anyway, he was just incredibly unhappy, and being naive again, I said, "Hey, what about not being a chef?" Well, he just about, when I walked outside to the waiting room, you could hear people people were looking at me and looking at him, kind of stuff. So anyway, I never saw him again. And then it was probably 10, 15 years later, I ran into him at a street fair. And he said, "I remember you." I was like, "Huh?" And he said, "You said about the other job." He said, "I did it." He said, "I work as a recreation officer. It's crap money, but I'm so much happier." Yeah? Now I know this sounds like, cliche, and then a little bird came and landed on his shoulder and the music started to swell and we all danced in the street. It sounds a bit like that, but it's not. It's just people about realising, am I living the life that I want? And so often when I meet people, I'm trying to find what is their ordinary world? What are you so busy doing? And does it make you feel alive or does it make you feel dead? And if it makes you feel dead, then there's a bit of a problem. Yeah, there's enough dead people walking around. Okay. Here's the latest to the Star Wars franchise. Again, a young woman, young person, separated from family, having to make it alone, waiting for family to return. What's her call to adventure? Has anybody seen this movie? Okay, those people who don't like Star Wars, you have to leave now. So suddenly, a person and a droid arrive. Oh, it's a droid, yeah? And for those of you who know Star Wars, droids often bring the call to adventure. And in this one, it's another call to adventure, and off she goes. She's busy living this life struggling, but actually, she's going to create a whole new life. The stories are fantastical, but what the writer is trying to say to you is these are symbols of a life either being a habitual life, a life of being tolerated, and there might be another life waiting for you if you were just kind of brave enough to think about that. Okay, Superman, again, separated from family. When you go through the Batmans, when you go through the Supermans, when you go through the Harry Potters, when you go through the Katniss Everdeen, they are all people who've lost family. And we tend not to think about that. We tend to think of it as silly superhero comics, whatever. Yeah? Harry Potter is a story of a boy who's on a search for whoever murdered his parents. Now, if you said that to most parents, I'm going to read your child a story about this kid is searching for the murderer of his parents. Parents would go, I don't think so. Yeah, but that's what it is. Okay. Of course, Kill Bill, and of course Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction, even though it chops and changes, Christopher Vogler, the guy I mentioned before, he's done an analysis of Pulp Fiction in terms of heroes' journeys, which they're all just cut up and placed together. Okay. Video games have known about the hero's journey for a long time. So the only one I know about, which is one I tried 10 years ago, was I think called Lara Croft. And, you know, it was in the hotel room and there was nothing else to do. So I was playing with Lara Croft and of course she just kept dying, but each time she's somehow separated from a safe world and a dangerous world. She has to go through tests and obstacles. You get better at the test, you get better at killing people, and then you get moved to the next level where the tests are harder, and eventually you get to the end and you get a reward. That is a hero journey. MasterChef and Biggest Loser and other reality TV shows do the hero's journey beautifully. We take a lot of people, we separate them from their usual world. Yeah? We throw them into a foreign, special world where they live with strangers. And then we put them through ordeal after ordeal after ordeal, and guess what? Those ordeals get harder and harder and harder. And each time, what are they doing? Learning really much improved cooking skills, but also skills about dealing with pressure, skills about dealing with time. These are beautiful examples of how the hero journey. So don't worry about it as kind of being this foreign thing that you have to go and study. You're very, very familiar with it. And remember, you're already wired to do this. There's been some studies where they just get inanimate things together and they put the triangle here and the square there. And then they ask, usually the undergraduate students in psychology who have to do the work because they're undergraduate students, what did you think? And people go, well, the pink triangle liked the square, the red square, but they got separated and then they had to go through this sort of test and ordeal. Like, we fill this stuff in, yeah? If you go to the sports column in your or whatever it might be, yeah? Those are really stories of, I'm not up to date, but you know, it's the story, say, of an Alfie Langer overcoming tests and obstacles. Will he make it through this week to play whatever it was, yeah, who's ever the current player? So you're very familiar with this. It's just about becoming more aware of it and how it happens in your life. Again, in life, we are constantly being separated, thrown into strange situations, and being tested. This is how we structure schools. So again, you can, and I think this is what happens, is that things are happening in real life, and the storytellers across time have been clever enough to realise that we are constantly being separated from our lives, taken out of the familiar, placed in the unfamiliar, having to go through a whole bunch of ordeals and tests to learn new skills, often skills we don't want to learn, that are helping us to become more our true selves, to helping us to create new chapters of our lives. Leaving home, separating jobs, losing health, that's a separation. Getting married, it is a separation. It's leaving one life for another. Okay. So, one of the things that I'd like to do now is kind of get you to start thinking about these aspects of the hero's journey. Yeah. So if you go to the page where the diagrams are, and just, you know, this is really up to you. I probably will ask people to share, but if nobody shares, that's fine too. And just try and go through each of those kind of phases and see if you can identify what is your ordinary world, or what was your ordinary world. Did you have a call to adventure? What it might be? This is not about getting it right or wrong. This is just about really starting to play with the Mudmap and how you might use it in your life. And remember, it can be either an intentional call to adventure, something that you intended and some change you introduced, or it could be something unexpected that happened. So try and nominate, what are the conditions of your ordinary world? Who's in it? Name the people in your ordinary world. Who are the important people? What are the stresses? What are the strains? What's good about it? What's bad about it? Yeah? So what might be your ordinary world? Who's in it? Who's important? Who's driving you crazy? Who do you wish would drop dead? And start to ask yourself the question, does your life fit? Is this the life that you actually want? Or is this the life that mummy and daddy said you should have? Yeah? Or is this the life that the culture says that you should have? Are you being the person that your boss thinks you should be? If you've done that, then go on to the second bit. See if you can name some calls to adventure. The beginning of a relationship, the ending of a relationship, starting a new job, moving to a new town, realizing you're different from everybody else. Yeah, that's often a good one. What are some of those calls to adventure? Some of them will be intentional, and some of them will just be left field. And if you've done that, be on the lookout to see if you're stuck in refusal of the call. And you'll know this by any thoughts that are along the lines of, I can't do that, I can't say that, I can't go there, I can't be this, I can't be a writer, I can't be a photographer, I can't go back to studying, I can't have that relationship, I can't leave that relationship, I can't leave that job, I can't have that job, like whatever the I can't might be. Yeah? I can't go to gym, I can't lose weight, I can't tell my partner that secret, whatever the I can't is. Alrighty, so you can keep jotting, but I thought just to make sense of it, I'll use one of the many hero journeys that I have been through. So this was about 4 or 5 years ago now, and I was being a superstar, as I usually am, in a psychiatric hospital, and I was really used to people saying, oh my God, you're fantastic, you're bloody fantastic, yeah? And I had a bit of an ego, so that, that was pretty good. And I'd been there for a long time, and I was really used to people saying, oh my God, you're fantastic. I was used to getting a bit of argy-bargy from fellow therapists when people wouldn't go to their groups, wanted to come to my groups, or people didn't want to be their client, they wanted to be my client, and I'd have to explain to people you can't just change. And, so I was used to being popular. And I was managing this allied health team, and I was being groomed for possibly running this hospital, yeah, and having to think about business studies and all sorts of things. And then we had a change in management. And the job that I loved, I would bounce out of bed. I'm here, everybody, it's Super Clive, yeah? And just loved it. We had a change of CEO. The new CEO, not a policy, not a structure was changed, but it's like I moved to Mars. It was a completely foreign situation. And I can't remember now, but it was either 10 or 11 managers disappeared. Yeah? And I was getting a bit anxious. So I was trying to be really good, work hard, be really good. And then there was a particular issue with a staff member, and I spoke to the new management, and he said, yeah, she's dreadful. We've got to get rid of her. So I'm like, okay, this is okay. And we'll do this, and we'll get this legal people and all this kind of stuff. And, there I was. But I'd had a feeling for a while, following this change of manager, change of culture, that my world, it didn't fit anymore. Something that I'd worked very hard at, very studiously at, very diligently at, something that gave me so much pleasure. It just, I don't know, it was just now like Groundhog Day. And I can't tell you, you might know this is one of the biggest issues I see with working with organisational problems when people come because of that, is fear. People working in fearful environments. This became a highly fearful environment. And I don't know if people work in fear, it's just unpleasant to go to work. And if people are disappearing left, right and centre, then not only was management scared, but a lot of younger therapists, my staff, social workers, whatever, they were really scared. You know, they were young parents with the first kid or the new mortgage, and they needed that job, and all that sort of stuff, yeah. And then one day, I just got shown the door. Yeah, like, hey, aren't I fantastic? I remember me, I'm super cool. And literally, that was it. And without really rhyme or reason, there had been a build-up to it, particularly in the staffing issue, the staff member that we were going to get rid of, but turns out that they were going to get rid of me. So I then spent a good 6 months overwhelmed with the two key emotions that follow an unwanted call to adventure. Yeah, fear and grief. Fear, because being the anxious person I am, oh my God, how am I going to pay the mortgage? Well, am I going to be a burden on my partner? Oh my God, that's going to affect my relationship. Oh my God, my partner's going to leave me. Oh, I'm going to be homeless and with our relationship. Oh, and I'm not young anymore. Oh my God, like I can really go from 0 to 100. You should meet the family. We're very good at being anxious. The DNA, whatever that part of that anxiety is, it's strong in my family. Yeah, the force is strong. So incredibly terrified. So, you know, I just went to sleep, which is a lot of fun. It's great fun. It's so much fun. Yeah. And then I'd be overwhelmed. So I was so anxious that I would just be walking the streets with my poor dog, who probably I wore out, but still walking. Yeah, because I knew thank God I'm a psychologist. I had to use up this adrenaline. I had to use up this cortisol. You know, because I got stuck in panic mode. I was doing my mindfulness, I was doing CBT, but I knew that exercise was really good for me. So, and I got stuck in this thing, which is like, this can't be happening. Remember, I'm Super Clive. I'm the one who's the star of the show. How can I be shown the door? It was really just pulled the carpet out from underneath me. Now, long story short, and this is what the hero journey, thank God I knew about the hero's journey. Because I already thought, I'm on the call to adventure, there's a whole bunch of tests coming. These things here, fear and grief, they are completely normal. Yeah? Now sometimes, I'd worked with previous clients that this happened to, and some people had never worked again. I was thinking, well, that's not going to happen here. One of the things that can happen with something like this is a whole lot of shame. Yeah? And I thank God I'm a psychologist. So I knew shame festers and grows through secrecy. So I told everybody, just like I'm telling you tonight. Yeah, I got shown the door. You know, people a bit go, oh, should you be telling me that? Don't you want me to think well of you? Well, this is who I really am, you know, like I'm not quite sure what I did yet, but I'll soon discover. So I made sure to just keep telling everybody, probably drove several people crazy with it, but I just kept going on and on about it, yeah, to get rid of this shame. And sure enough, you know, if you keep walking, keep doing your mindfulness, keep doing your CBT, keep sharing, keep crying, keep doing all the things that you know to do as a psychologist, this starts to, and then you start to, meet some mentors who are then, and in psychology, we have supervisors. So they're older, wiser psychologists who go, you'll survive this. No, I won't. I didn't survive that flu, it almost killed me, you know. You'll survive, and in fact, you'll go on and remember, you know, the hero's journey. So when I would forget, I'd go back and I'd go, that's right, this is all just the ending of one chapter. I'm being separated from my old life. I have a limited awareness of what the real problem is, but I'm about to find out there's going to be a whole bunch of tests. Anyway, of course, it has a whole happy story, and now I've got my business, and I'm a bit booked out from my business, a bit tired, but anyway, that's another issue to deal with. But now I'm doing much more of something what I truly love. Yeah? So I think by the end of the year I finished the book and the whole new chapter began. Now I'm in the fortunate situation where I see people go through many forced and unwanted calls to adventure. But I do remind people that this terrible thing is the beginning of a new chapter. And it's happened enough times in my own life now that I know that this is true. I know it sounds really new age and I don't have any empirical evidence yet, but I'm working on it. Yeah? So just to remember that these dreadful things, this is what the hero does. They realize that these dreadful things are going to turn out to be that not breaks a life, but makes a life. Yeah? So have a think about what you've written down. Try and find out, because if you buy my marvellous book, you'll realise there's questions at each stage which will tell you how to recognise where you are and what is required at that stage, what might happen at that stage. So I'll try to give as much information for each stage so you can recognise, whether you live in downtown Hendra or downtown New York, where you are in your own hero's journey. Yeah? Okay, so in these last couple of minutes, any questions? And then please make sure you fill in your feedback form. So I've done a lot of talking. Does anybody want to ask anything? It doesn't have to be anything revealing, it can be quite general.
Would you say, Clive, that this is a mindset? This is a...
Yeah, for me, it's become a mindset, yeah. So...
a skill set.
Yeah, so recently, what was going on? So, so at the moment, in this particular hero's journey that I'm in, I'm at about stage 7, where the tests and obstacles are becoming much bigger and much more difficult. And so, for example, trying to run a full-time business, trying to run websites, trying to be the bookkeeper, the IT guy, it's a terribly sad story, trying to run classes, that was just doing my head in. Like, who has time? Yeah? And so I was saying, it's never going to happen, I'm never going to have these classes, and I was having a little tanty about it and stamping my foot and doing all those things. But, you know, lo and behold, the gods have sent a gift in the form of Marlene, who sits down the back, and she's now making these things happen. And so constantly, I might still whinge and whine a bit, but I'm realising that I'm often asking myself, what's the skill I'm supposed to learn here? With this whole thing, you know, initially I spent a whole lot of time blaming, you know, and how could I possibly do this and possibly do that? And then I really had to go back and say, well, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. I know there was some crazy behaviour going on, but there was stuff that I was doing. What was I doing? And what I realised was that one of my strengths, which I think is my humour, it actually turned out to be my weakness. Yeah? And something that people had always praised me about, my sense of humour, in that new culture got me into a lot of trouble. People found my humour very confronting, and I had no idea. Yeah? I just thought, even tonight, you know, there might be people who are distressed by my sense of humour. So it's this thing, and then you have to take that on board and kind of go, okay, well, do I go too far? Am I disrespectful? Do I need to apologise? Do I need to grow up? What's the lesson? Yeah. So yeah, it is a definite mindset. You know, and of course I've inculcated, is that the right word? My partner now, and he's the same. He kind of goes, bloody hell, another bloody test. What am I supposed to learn? You know, we think about it, we talk about it. Yeah. And then often what's been a negative and an anxiety, it'll shift into, got it, and now there's motivation. That's pretty remarkable. Yeah. For a person who spent a lifetime avoiding conflict, to actually, for now, to some people find me very confronting. And I have no idea I'm being confronting, you know, because I still think I'm quietly spoken and politely spoken and very rarely swear, at least in professional settings. But people might find me very confronting. Yeah. I was recently with a bunch of lawyers and I got that feedback and I was thinking, what advice?
Lawyers
Confronting about that. Yeah, and then they liked it. They liked the confrontation. They don't have the guts to say it. I was thinking, I could be wrong. So, comments, questions, anything not make sense? You know I'm going to feel really bad now because no one else asked a question today. So guilt and that. See, guilt always works.
Mentors, where do you find your mentors?
They might often be under your nose. So, for example, what seems to happen is that by being in this situation, sometimes just there are people around you who have been through similar situations, but because I don't know whether it's because we've inherited from our English heritage or something that we're a bit sort of stoic. There might be people around, and if you just kind of start to now make yourself just a little bit more vulnerable, sometimes those people might go, yeah, that happened to me. Boom, there's a mentor. Or you can definitely go looking. So, I definitely have a supervisor, an older, wiser therapist that I speak to, that I take away names and speak anonymously about clients. It's just be on the lookout for people who may have been down a very similar path. It won't be the same because each of those journeys is unique, but hopefully, as you can see, we often share similar tests. Yeah. And therapists can be mentors. But like anything, you just got to make sure you get a good therapist. And what I mean by that is just somebody that you click with. We've done a lot of research now about how does therapy work, and there seems to be quite a bit of evidence that it does. But the main factor seems to be you've got to click with the person. It doesn't matter if you're sitting with Freud or Jung or some other famous person. If you don't click, it's not going to work. Yeah. Alrighty, well, we might wrap it up there, and thank you very much for coming.